"You're too expensive," the CFO said, replacing me with an outsourced team. I nodded. The next day, a Department of Defense general walked into the office. He pointed at the new team. "Who are these civilians touching my data? Shut it down. Shut it all down now." It was a Tuesday when the axe fell. Tuesday is a garbage day for bad news. It ruins the whole rhythm of the week. I was deep in a level 3 audit log, tracking a packet loss that looked suspicious when my phone buzzed. It was HR. "Bring your badge," the text said, classic, subtle as a brick through a windshield. I walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 12th floor. The air conditioning was set to meet locker, probably to preserve the new CFO's ego. His name was Greg. Greg looked like he was assembled in a factory that makes generic villains for Hallmark movies. Too much teeth, a suit that cost more than my car, and eyes that were dead inside. He'd been here 3 weeks. He didn't know a server from a toaster oven. "Margaret," Greg said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair like he was about to bestow wisdom upon a peasant. "We've been reviewing the operational expenditures. Specifically your department." "I am the department, Greg," I said, not sitting down. My knees were killing me from crawling under the racks earlier. "Exactly," he smiled. It was a shark smile. "And you're very premium. We found a solution that's more aligned with our new fiscal agility strategy." "Fiscal agility," I repeated. The phrase tasted like expired milk. "You mean you found someone cheaper?" "Significantly," he said, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. "We've contracted an external team. Offshore, very dynamic. They start tomorrow. We'll need your access keys and your badge by end of day." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I searched for a sign of intelligence, a flicker of understanding that we handle data requiring TSI clearance protocols. I saw nothing but $signs in the reflection of his own veneers. "Greg," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "does this dynamic new team have federal clearance? Do they know the handshake protocols for the DoD uplinks? Because if they don't, you're not just breaking a contract. You're committing a felony." He laughed. He actually chuckled like I was a toddler explaining quantum physics. "You tech people always make it sound so dramatic. It's just data, Margaret. It's ones and zeros. Don't worry about the big picture. That's my job. By the way, if you're enjoying watching a corporate suit casually destroy his own life, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button and upvote. It keeps the caffeine flowing and the stories coming. Seriously, do it now because it's about to get ugly." I stood there for a solid 10 seconds. The rage was a hot stone in my gut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the heavy oak chair through the glass wall. I wanted to explain that the ones and zeros he was talking about were logistics coordinates for military hardware. But then a cold, dark feeling washed over me. It was the feeling of a calm sea right before a tsunami. "Okay," I said. Greg blinked. He was expecting a fight. He was expecting begging. "Okay, you're the boss, Greg. Fiscal agility. I get it." I unclipped I placed it on the table, and I reached into my pocket and pulled out the physical RSA token, the master key for the admin console. I set it down next to the badge with a soft click. "I assume this new team is ready to take over the handshake at midnight?" I asked. "They're fully briefed." Greg waved a hand dismissively. "You can pack your personal items," he said. I walked out. I didn't storm. I didn't slam the door. I walked to my desk, picked up my framed photo of my dog, my lucky stapler, and my cactus. I left the documentation. I left the sticky notes explaining the quirks of the firewall. I left the manual I wrote from scratch over 6 years. But here's the thing about fully briefed outsourced teams hired by guys like Greg. They work off scripts. They don't know the ghost in the machine. They don't know that the server rack in corner 3 overheats if you run the backup at 2 a.m., or that the federal uplink requires a manual heartbeat signal every 6 hours or it locks down the entire building. I took the elevator down to the parking lot. The sun was shining, which felt insulting. I threw my box in the passenger seat of my beat-up sedan. I lit a cigarette, my first in 3 years, and inhaled until my lungs burned. Fiscal agility. I muttered to the dashboard. I drove home. I stopped at the liquor store and bought a bottle of bourbon, the expensive stuff, because I wasn't unemployed. I was retired. And tomorrow, Greg was going to find out exactly what he'd bought with his budget. Cuts. I sat on my couch, staring at the flickering TV screen. I wasn't watching it. The sound was just background noise to distract me from the thoughts crashing through my mind. I could still feel the cold press of the RSA token in my pocket. The same token I had left behind on the conference table. The same token that would seal Greg's fate. I took a sip of bourbon. It burned as it went down, the warmth spreading through me. But the numbness was only temporary. There was something oddly satisfying about all of it, though. I was the one who'd been discarded. The one who'd been told I was too expensive. But now, I had a front row seat to watch a corporate disaster unfold. It was nearing midnight. I knew the new team would try to access the system. They didn't understand it the way I did. They didn't know the small, vital details that kept everything running smoothly. The quirks, the glitches, the hidden dangers. They didn't have clearance, not really. And they sure as hell didn't know the handshake protocols for the federal uplinks. They had no idea what they were walking into. I wasn't going to fix it. No, I wasn't a hero. I wasn't going to rush back and save their asses, especially not after what they'd done. What Greg had done. He'd tossed me out like I was some kind of relic, thinking the company could get by without me. He had no idea what was at stake. No idea that the system I built wasn't just a network. It was a living thing. And when you pushed it too far, it would fight back. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The streetlights flickered in the distance, a pale yellow glow against the dark sky. It felt strange to be here, in my apartment, while everything was going to hell at the office. My office. I'd been there for 6 years dedicated. Now, I was nothing. But the company. They were going to realize their mistake soon enough. I pulled out my phone and checked the notifications. Nothing yet. But I knew it was coming. The system was smart. The contractors had already failed once. They would try again. And this time there would be consequences. The minutes dragged on, each one slipping by slower than the last. I could almost feel the system humming from here. I was out, but I was still connected. My number was hard-coded into the emergency alert system. I'd meant to remove it, I had. But in the chaos of leaving, I must have forgotten. I glanced at the clock, 11:55 p.m. I wasn't sure if it was the liquor, the anticipation, or just the thrill of it all. But I felt like I was on the edge of something huge. I could almost hear the faint buzzing of the servers in the building, the cold, calculated pulse of technology doing its thing. They had no idea. No idea that the system was already watching, waiting. I took another drink. The warmth spread through my chest, and for a moment, I felt a little lighter. The world wasn't perfect, but at least I was in control of this moment. Tomorrow they'd have to answer for their mistake. The phone buzzed. The screen lit up, a system alert flashed across it, unrecognized IP address attempting admin access. I smiled. There they were, the contractors, trying to break in, just like I knew they would. But they weren't using the secure VPN I'd set up. They were coming through the front door, like amateurs. The alert buzzed again, incorrect credentials. Attempt 2, attempt 3. I could feel the tension building in the pit of my stomach, but I stayed calm. This was just the beginning. They'd get desperate. They'd keep trying. But they didn't have the token. They didn't have the right clearance. The phone buzzed again. Unauthorized user detected in restricted zone. It was happening. The system was shutting them out. Protocol 7 had been triggered. I'd written that protocol. It wasn't just a lockout. No, it was more than that. It flagged the attempt as a hostile act. It was a breach. The system had already started the silent trace. It was only a matter of time before the authorities were notified. I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling the adrenaline creeping into my veins. The world outside the window was still, but in that moment, everything was moving. Everything was falling apart, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. Another notification. Critical firewall breach attempted on port 8080. I laughed. They were trying to route through the web traffic. They had no idea. This wasn't a casual hack. This was a full-on attack. They'd crossed a line now. The system was recording every move they made. Every keystroke was being documented. This wasn't just an error anymore. This was evidence. I poured another drink. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, catching the light from the street lamps outside. Another buzz. Another alert. Federal Compliance Watchdog triggered. Level 1. The first domino had fallen. The government was about to be involved. They'd figure out soon enough that the breach wasn't some small glitch. No, it was much bigger than that. I set my glass down and leaned back on the couch. There was nothing more to do now but wait. And in the back of my mind, I knew what was coming. It wasn't going to end here. This was just the start. The hours dragged on, the tension in the air thickening with each passing minute. It was 1 a.m. now, and I couldn't help but picture the scene back at the office, the chaotic mess they'd be in by now. I could almost hear the frantic calls, the confused chatter. But I wasn't there, and I didn't plan to be. I checked my phone. The notifications had piled up, more system alerts, more breach attempts, and now I was getting them in real time. The new team was still trying, their attempts getting messier by the minute. The system was holding strong, but it wouldn't be long before someone, somewhere, realized the scope of the disaster unfolding. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. How had it come to this? 6 years. 6 years of dedication, of building something so intricate, so secure, and for what? To be replaced by an outsourced team with no understanding of the delicate machinery that kept the company running. I wasn't just a casualty of a budget cut. This was negligence. This was a failure of leadership. I knew that Greg was probably sitting in some overpriced office, thinking he'd made a smart move. But I also knew he was too stupid to understand what was coming. He had no clue what he'd set into motion. I wasn't just fired. I was being erased, dismissed as if my work didn't matter. But it did. And tonight, it was going to matter more than ever. I stood up, pacing around the small apartment, feeling the weight of the bourbon in my gut, but also a strange sense of satisfaction. Greg had underestimated me. All of them had. They thought they could just replace me with a cheaper option and move on. But the system I'd built, it wasn't something you could just plug and play. It wasn't a commodity. And now, the whole thing was falling apart. A buzz from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. The alerts were becoming more frequent. I felt a cold smile creep onto my face. The system was doing its job, shutting down the intruders, locking them out, just as I'd designed it. The next notification came through. System alert, unauthorized access attempt from unverified IP. And then another, and another. I could almost hear their panic from here. They were probably sweating in some faraway call center, trying to figure out why their credentials weren't working, why their access was being denied at every turn. They thought it was a glitch. They had no idea that it was my handiwork. The phone buzzed again. Unauthorized access attempt, incorrect credentials. Attempt 2. Attempt 3. The system was pushing back, blocking them at every turn. The defense protocols were in full swing now, each attempt flagged and traced. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. It was working. Every piece of the security framework I'd put in place, every line of code I'd written, was coming together. The more they tried, the deeper the hole they dug for themselves. It wasn't just a failed attempt anymore. It was becoming a federal breach. A level red. I checked the time again. 1:30 a.m. The building was probably a ghost town by now, save for the cleaning crew and the night security guard. But I wasn't interested in the empty halls. I was interested in what was happening on the other end of the line. At some point I stopped paying attention to the notifications. They were just noise now. The system was in control, but then something changed. The buzz came again. This time it wasn't just another failed login attempt. It was something different. A new alert. A critical breach. I sat up straight, the bourbon momentarily forgotten. The words on the screen made my stomach tighten. Federal Compliance Watchdog triggered. Level 1. That was it. The first domino had fallen. The government had been alerted. This was no longer just a company issue. The breach had reached the authorities. I took a slow, deliberate breath. It was happening. The system was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, exactly what I designed it to do. It wasn't just an IT failure anymore. It was a national security issue. I glanced at the clock again. 1:45 a.m. The phone buzzed yet again. Another alert. The government was officially involved now. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I'd done it. But even as the system continued its automated response, even as the breach spiraled into something much larger than Greg could have imagined, I knew that the real fallout was just beginning. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. The message was short, just one line. Margaret, it's Greg. We're getting some weird automated calls. Probably a glitch in that old system you built. I need the passcode to shut off the alarm. The noise is annoying the new team. Call me back. I smiled and set the phone down. Let him deal with it. Let him handle the mess he'd created. He was the one who'd fired me, after all. He was the one who'd called me. Too expensive. Let him explain this to the feds. I didn't pick up the phone. It was time to let the system do the talking. The first light of dawn was just starting to bleed into the sky when I checked my phone again. The alerts were still coming in faster now. The system was in full meltdown. Greg had no idea what he was dealing with. He probably thought this was just some minor glitch. I could almost hear his voice in my head, sweaty, frantic, trying to calm down a team that was too clueless to fix what they'd broken. I should have felt sorry for him. I should have felt bad that everything he'd worked for was slipping through his fingers. But I didn't. I'd seen this coming. Greg had been too blinded by his own sense of fiscal superiority to see the iceberg looming ahead. The phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. This time, it was a call, not a text. I hesitated for a second. I could pick up, tell Greg what a disaster he was running, and rub salt into the wound. But I wasn't interested in his panic anymore. I was done. It was all out of my hands now. I let the call ring out. It was my choice. I wasn't going to fix this for him. If he wanted to save his skin, he was going to have to do it himself. The system was already one step ahead, and it was working precisely as I'd designed it. There was no stopping the avalanche now. The time read 2:15 a.m. I stared out the window, my mind replaying the moments in that conference room when Greg had so carelessly dismissed me. How quickly he'd signed my termination papers, as though my presence didn't matter. And here we were, just hours later, with the entire company on the verge of collapse. I had spent years crafting the security system for this company. I had been the one to ensure the government contracts stayed secure, that every system ran smoothly. But to Greg, I was just a cog in the machine, something he could throw away without a second thought. The problem was, when you fire the person who knows where the bodies are buried, you're in trouble. And tonight, Greg had just buried himself. The alerts kept buzzing. They were escalating now. Level 1, Level 2. Federal compliance escalated. The government was involved. I smirked. It wasn't just a breach anymore. It was a mess that was beyond repair. I took another sip of bourbon. The warm burn spread through me, but it didn't help with the cold feeling in my gut. I wasn't just walking away from this. I was letting the system handle it. The system I'd built. The system that had been dismissed like an afterthought. The phone buzzed once more. This time, the number wasn't Greg's. It was a private number. I sat up straighter, knowing exactly who it was. I picked it up, letting it ring once more before answering. "This is Margaret," I said, my voice flat. "Margaret, this is General Vance. Department of Defense. We have a situation at your company. You're listed as the primary technical lead for the security system. I need you to come in. Immediately." I took a breath, trying to suppress the rush of satisfaction that hit me. I had known this would happen. The government didn't take security breaches lightly, especially when the data involved was as sensitive as military logistics. "I'm not employed there anymore," I said calmly. "I was fired yesterday." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him processing the information, no doubt trying to figure out how the hell I was still the person they needed. "Fired?" General Vance finally asked, his voice colder now. "And you're still the one with the keys?" I paused. "Yes, sir, I'm the one with the keys." "Then get your ass to the site. We're sending a team to meet you. Don't waste any time." I hung up without another word, staring at my phone for a moment. I wasn't surprised. The general had known exactly what I was capable of, even if the people back at the office hadn't. They'd all been too busy patting themselves on the back for saving a few bucks. Too busy to see the bigger picture. I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. I had work to do. I grabbed my keys and a jacket, not bothering to change out of my pajamas. It wasn't like I had anything to prove anymore. The company had discarded me. But now, I was walking back into the lion's den, not as an employee, but as the one person who could fix the mess they'd created. The drive to the office was slow. The streets were eerily quiet, the hum of my car's engine the only sound. I should have been nervous, but I wasn't. This was my domain. I had built this system. And if anyone could fix it, it was me. By the time I reached the office, the place was crawling with police and federal agents. The parking lot was filled with black SUVs and emergency vehicles. I drove past the barricades, the officers eyeing me as I rolled down my window. "I'm Margaret," I said, my voice sharp. "General Vance sent me." The officer hesitated, then waved me through without another word. I parked my car and stepped out, taking in the scene. The building was swarming with people, some in suits, some in tactical gear, all of them looking frantic. I made my way to the entrance, ignoring the stares as I walked past the evacuated employees standing outside. Greg was nowhere in sight, but I knew he was probably holed up somewhere, trying to figure out how to lie his way out of this mess. A team of federal agents met me at the door, escorting me up to the 12th floor. As I walked through the hallways, the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone knew things were about to get worse before they got better. When I reached the server room, I could hear the whir of the fans, the mechanical hum of the machines that I had spent so long configuring. It was all under lockdown now, and the temperature was climbing. I was the only one who could fix it. I sat at the terminal, my fingers moving quickly across the keys. I wasn't just typing a password. I was writing a script, bypassing the security protocols that had been triggered. This was my domain, and I wasn't going to let anyone else destroy it. The general stood behind me, watching silently as I worked. "How long do you need?" he asked. I didn't look up. "Not long," I said. "Just enough time to fix the mess." The screen blinked green. The fans started to whir again. The temperature began to drop. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The system was back online. "It's done," I said. The general nodded, his expression unreadable. But for me, this was only the beginning. Greg was going to learn the hard way that you don't just fire the person who knows where the bodies are buried. I took my seat at the terminal, the low hum of the server racks filling the room as the fluorescent lights overhead flickered. The temperature in here was already rising, a subtle heat that could turn catastrophic in a matter of hours. I glanced at the clock. 2:30 a.m. The building had long since emptied, save for the skeleton crew of federal agents and a few straggling employees who had been left behind. But I wasn't one of them anymore. I wasn't even an employee. I was just the person who could save this company from the mess they'd made. I tapped a few keys, pulling up the server log to see just how far the breach had spread. It wasn't pretty. There were attempts everywhere, failed logins, unauthorized access. The contractors had been at it for hours. What made it worse was that the system had locked down early, triggering the protocols I'd set in place. I watched the stream of code on the screen, knowing exactly what to look for and exactly where the mistakes were. The government was involved now. That much was clear. The federal watchdog had triggered, and a compliance failure on this scale could take years to recover from. If it wasn't handled right, it could ruin the company's reputation for good. But it wasn't just the company on the line anymore. This was a national security issue. The contracts we held weren't just data on a screen, they were the coordinates, the sensitive movements of military operations. If the wrong person got their hands on that, we'd be in a world of hurt. I was the one who had written the protocols. The ones designed to stop this exact kind of mistake. It wasn't that I wanted to make them fail. It was that I wanted them to learn. I wasn't about to let this go on because Greg thought he could save money by replacing me with an offshore team that didn't know the difference between a firewall and a teapot. The general stood behind me silent. I could feel his presence, the weight of his impatience pressing down on me. But I didn't let it rush me. I wasn't doing this for him. I wasn't doing this for anyone except myself. They had fired me, but I was still the only one who knew how to save their asses. I entered a few more lines of code, and the system responded instantly. The screens blinked, a green light flashing at the corner of the terminal. The fans inside the server room began to spin faster, the cooling systems kicking back in. The temperature had dropped, not by much but enough to keep the hardware from frying. I had saved the data. I had stopped the meltdown. "It's done," I said, leaning back in the chair. I didn't look at the general, but I could feel his eyes on me assessing. I could feel his relief he knew what had almost been lost. He took a step closer, his voice low and controlled. "You're the only one who could have done this, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't afford to sound too smug, but I wasn't about to deny the truth. I built it. Of course I could. He nodded slowly, the wheels turning in his head. "We need you, Margaret. You're the only one who understands this system. You're the only one who can keep it intact." The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with meaning. He was right, but that didn't mean I was going to roll over and jump back into the company's lap. I wasn't desperate, and I wasn't going to work under the same conditions as before. I stood up, walking over to the server panel. I ran my hand along the edge, taking in the steady hum of the system, the delicate balance I'd worked so hard to create. I'm not going back, General, not as an employee. He didn't push. Instead, he followed me, his tone shifting to something more practical. Then what do you want? I turned to face him, crossing my arms. I'm available. I can help, but I'm not your team's last resort. I want the position I deserve, a real title, and I want compensation that reflects the responsibility I've just taken on. I'm not doing this for a paycheck, but I'm not doing it for nothing either. The general was quiet for a beat, weighing my words, his gaze sharp as he processed everything. I wasn't making a demand, I was simply laying down the facts. I had the expertise, I had the power, I had everything they needed. Finally, he spoke. You're asking for a lot, and I'm offering a solution, I said. I'm offering you a way out of this mess, a way to avoid a full-scale federal investigation. But I won't do it on a whim. I need control, and I need a new office, one with actual security. No more basement bullshit. His lips twitched into the smallest of smiles. I'll get the paperwork started. You'll have the office, the title. We'll discuss the salary when we can afford it. I didn't smile back. I wasn't interested in playing games anymore. I'll need my credentials restored, and a terminal ready for me in the morning. You'll have it, he said. Everything you need. Consider this the start of a new arrangement. I watched him turn to leave, then paused. One more thing, he turned back, his brow furrowed. I want Greg's office, I said. It has the best view. He gave a short, dry laugh, clearly amused, but nodded. As he walked out, I turned back to the terminal, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. The fans in the server room hummed louder now, a comforting sound, a sign that everything was back in place. For now. But I knew better. There were always new challenges ahead. Always more systems to secure, more people to control. I couldn't help but smile to myself. This wasn't over, it had only just begun. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and frantic emails. The building was alive with activity, agents swarming the hallways, technicians scrambling to get systems back online, and executives, pale and wide-eyed, trying to make sense of the mess they'd found themselves in. I'd done my part. The system was secure for now, but the damage was done. The breach had been a full-scale failure, and Greg's little cost-cutting move had opened the door for the kind of disaster we had all feared. I walked through the office, now a hive of chaos, my footsteps deliberate and calm amidst the noise. The air felt different now, tense, unsure. It wasn't the usual hum of productivity. It was the buzz of a company on the edge of a collapse, trying to put itself back together. The general had made good on his word. My office was ready, up on the 12th floor, the one with the view of the city. It was the kind of space that made you feel like you were in charge. But as I entered, I wasn't thinking about the luxury of the office. I was thinking about the deal I had made. I sat at the desk, letting the quiet settle around me. The view was impressive, but it was the quiet hum of the system beneath my fingers that calmed me. I wasn't just the lead anymore. I wasn't just a cog in the wheel. I was the one with control, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. The door opened behind me, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I knew the sound of those footsteps. It was Greg, stumbling in like a man who had just realized the full weight of his mistakes. His tie was loosened, his face pale and drawn, and his hands were shaking. He was trying to hold it together, but it wasn't working. Margaret, he started, his voice shaky. Look, I know things got out of hand. But this isn't what I intended. You know I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to make things easier, more efficient. I didn't say anything. I just turned in the chair, watching him stumble over his words. Please, he continued, his voice now desperate. I need you. We need you. The board is freaking out and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this from blowing up. I looked at him for a long moment, watching the man who had so casually dismissed me like I didn't matter. The man who thought that firing me, the person who had kept everything running, was just another way to cut costs. He didn't understand, he never had. You think I'm going to fix this for you, don't you? I asked, my voice calm. You think that just because you've brought me back in, I'm going to clean up your mess and pretend like nothing happened." Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. His eyes were wide, panic creeping in. I leaned forward in the chair, not caring that he was watching me now. "I'm not your savior, Greg. I'm not going to come in and pretend like everything's okay. You didn't just fire an employee. You fired the person who built this entire system. And now you're here, begging me to fix the mess you created. I don't work for you anymore. I work for the Department of Defense now, whether you like it or not." His face shifted, and I saw something I hadn't expected: fear. Real fear. "What does that mean? You're going to let the company fall apart?" I stood up, walking past him toward the window, my hands resting lightly on the sill. "I'm not going to let the company fall apart," I said, my back to him. "But I'm not going to fix it for you either. You'll have to figure it out. You'll have to face the consequences of your choices. I'm not your fixer anymore." There was a long silence before he spoke again, his voice quieter now. "So, you're just going to leave us all to burn?" I turned slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time since he entered the room. "I'm not leaving anyone to burn, Greg. But I'm not going to rescue you either. You wanted to save money. Well, here it is. This is the cost of your fiscal agility. The systems I put in place are still standing because I designed them to protect you, even if you didn't understand how. But they can't protect you from your own stupidity. Not anymore." He didn't say anything after that. He just stood there, the weight of the moment sinking in. He didn't get it. He couldn't. He had no idea what it meant to build something that had to be flawless, to maintain the delicate balance between security and accessibility. And now, he was paying the price for his ignorance. I turned back to the window, my fingers tapping lightly against the glass. The view was beautiful, but it didn't mean anything to me anymore. Not in the way it used to. The city below was sprawling, full of life, full of opportunity. But for me, it was just a reminder that things could change in an instant. One decision, one bad call, and everything could fall apart. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension, until Greg finally spoke again. I can't fix this without you," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to make it right." I glanced over my shoulder, catching his desperate expression. For a moment, something shifted inside me. A small part of me felt the tug of sympathy, the desire to help, to do the right thing. But that part of me quickly shriveled up, drowned by the memory of how easily I had been discarded. How easily they had let me go, as if I was replaceable. "You can't fix it, Greg," I said quietly. "Not without me, but not because of me. You made your bed, now you get to lie in it, and I'm done cleaning up after you." I heard him leave, the door clicking shut behind him, but I didn't turn. I didn't need to watch him go. The moment was over. What came next was out of my hands. I had done all I could, and as I sat back down at the desk, I knew one thing for sure: things were going to be different now. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light across the empty office floor. I sat alone in my new office, the hum of the air conditioning sound breaking the silence. The windows provided a clear view of the city, an expanse of streets, buildings, and the steady rush of life below. But none of that mattered to me now. Not in the way it once did. I had my space, my title, my authority. The general had made sure of that. But it was all a little too quiet, too still. The adrenaline had worn off, and the weight of everything I had set into motion was beginning to settle in. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the desk. My desk? Not Greg's. Not anyone else's. Mine. The wood was cool, polished, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The door opened with a soft click, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I'd been expecting him. "Margaret," General Vance said as he stepped into the room, his tone low and controlled. "We need to talk." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure what he wanted to say. I wasn't sure what he could say that would make a difference. The work I had done for him was over. The systems were back in place, the breach contained, but the damage to the company was undeniable. What was done was done. Was everything secured? He asked, his gaze flickering toward the terminal on my desk. I nodded, tapping a few keys without looking at him. "The systems are stable. The breach has been contained. The temperature is down and the data is safe." He walked around the desk, looking down at the monitor. "Good," he said, his voice measured. "You did more than just save their asses, you know." I glanced at him then, my eyes meeting his for the first time in a while. "I did what needed to be done," I said. "You're welcome, but don't get too comfortable. The system is working because I made it work. It doesn't mean the company is out of the woods yet. This is just the beginning." He raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Instead, he leaned against the edge of my desk, his arms crossed over his chest. "I've got a question for you," he said, his voice a little quieter now. I didn't speak, but I motioned for him to continue. He was right. The tension between us was thick, but it wasn't the kind that would break easily. "You've been in the trenches?" he said slowly, "dealing with all this for years. You've seen it all. So tell me this, what happens now? Where do you go from here?" It was a question I hadn't asked myself, not in the way he meant. I'd been so focused on the immediate task at hand, the systems, the protocols, the breach, that I hadn't stopped to think about what I really wanted out of all this. Sure, I had a new office, a better position, and more control, but was that enough? I don't know, I admitted. I guess I'll figure it out. For now, I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again. But after that, who knows? He nodded, not pushing further. He could see it in my face, I think. I was still working through it, trying to reconcile the woman I was with the one I had just become. "You've earned this," he said after a long silence. "More than anyone else in this building. The board knows it, and I'm sure the people in charge do too. You've earned more than just a seat at the table, Margaret. You've earned the whole damn room." I glanced back at the window, the city spread out before me. It was easy to get lost in the view, to forget the things that had led me here. But I couldn't afford to. Not now, not when I had so much more to prove. "And Greg?" I asked, finally turning my gaze back to him. "What happens to him?" Vance let out a slow breath. "He's not in a good position. Not after this. The board is looking into his actions. They'll probably let him walk away quietly, but he'll never get the same level of responsibility again. His career is done." I didn't feel any satisfaction in hearing that. In a way, I had already taken what I needed from him. His confidence, his arrogance. He had no idea what it was like to be in charge of something that mattered, to keep things running without anyone noticing until it was too late. "But you," Vance continued, his voice sharp, "you're not going anywhere. You're staying right here, and you're in charge of making sure nothing like this ever happens again." I met his gaze, the weight of his words settling over me. "I will. But don't expect me to play nice. I'm here to do what needs to be done, nothing more, nothing less." He nodded, pushing himself off the desk and straightening his uniform. "Fair enough. But remember, you're not alone in this. You've got the resources now, Margaret. Use them." I watched him leave the room, the door closing softly behind him. And for the first time since I'd stepped into this role, I felt the gravity of everything I had just stepped into. The stakes had changed, the playing field had shifted. I wasn't the woman who had walked out of this building less than 4 hours ago. That woman was gone. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence envelop me. The work wasn't done, not by a long shot. There was still so much more to rebuild. But now I had the power to do it. And I wasn't going to waste it. I had everything I needed now. Everything I had fought for. But there was one thing left to do. Make sure they all knew that I was in charge now. The following day felt like a new beginning, but in a way that left a bitter taste in my mouth. I sat at my desk, the weight of everything that had transpired sorely starting to sink in. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. The office was still new to me, the chair too big, the desk too polished. I wasn't used to this level of comfort, used to being the overlooked one, the one everyone took for granted. Now, I was the one with the power, the one who held the strings, but the responsibility sat heavier than I'd expected. I'd walked in that morning, greeted by an empty building, the employees already too afraid to speak to me. Greg was nowhere to be found. He'd been quickly swept aside, and I could feel the weight of his absence. The building felt quieter than usual, and I knew that it wasn't just because of the shift in power. There was something different in the air, something that spoke to the tension, the change that had come over the company. I was alone in this office, at least for now. General Vance had given me the power I needed to make things right, but even now, with all the resources at my disposal, I felt a pull inside me. I wasn't here to clean up their mess, not for Greg, not for the company, but for me. This was my redemption. The phone buzzed on my desk, and I picked it up without thinking. It was a call from Susan in HR. I knew this was coming. After all, the board would want to keep tabs on the chaos, and Susan was always the messenger. Her voice, though strained, was still trying to remain professional. "Margaret, we need to talk. The board has set up a meeting. They want to discuss your new role." I leaned back in the chair, running my fingers along the smooth edge of the desk. "I'm listening. They want to know how you plan on handling everything. I think they want some reassurance about your leadership and, well, the direction you're taking." "Tell them I've got it under control," I said. My voice was steady, maybe too steady, but I knew this was my moment to assert myself. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. This company has problems, big ones, but I can fix them. And I will. The board just has to trust me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her scribbling something down. "I'll let them know, but you know how they are. They'll want more than just words," I smiled. "I'm not just giving them words, Susan. I'm giving them action." I hung up and stared out the window. The city stretched out before me, sprawling and endless, full of life. But I wasn't interested in the view. I was thinking about what came next. The company was broken, and it wasn't going to be fixed overnight. There were systems to rebuild, trust to regain, and a lot of damage control to handle. But I was done playing the background role. I was done being the one who quietly picked up the pieces. Now I was the one holding the hammer. The door opened, and I turned to see Jessica Taylor walking in. She was one of the few who hadn't completely avoided me after my abrupt departure, and I had to admit, I respected her for it. Her confidence was something I hadn't expected, especially after everything that had gone down. She was sharp, ambitious, and in some ways, she reminded me of myself when I first started here, hungry for something more. "I see you've settled in," Jessica said, a small smile on her face as she closed the door behind her. "Yeah, it's not bad," I said, motioning to the space around me. "But it's not about the office, Jess. It's about what I'm going to do with it." She tilted her head, watching me carefully. "I figured. I know you're not the type to let this go to your head. So, what's next?" I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the desk. "Next. We rebuild. We clean up Greg's mess, and we make sure it never happens again." "That's the plan?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "That's just the beginning. I'm going to take this company to a place it's never been before. I'm going to make sure we never forget who we are, and I'll make sure the board knows exactly what I'm capable of." Jessica stepped forward, looking at the computer screen on my desk. "Sounds like you're ready to take control." I nodded. "I am, but it's not about control, Jess, it's about trust. And right now, I don't trust the people at the top. They think they can replace me, but I'm not replaceable." Her eyes narrowed. "And you think they'll listen?" "They'll have no choice," I said, my voice firm. Jessica seemed to weigh my words carefully before speaking again. "I can get behind that. I know you've got what it takes. You've always been the one who saw the bigger picture." I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. This was it. This was my chance to prove everything. To prove to myself, to Greg, to everyone that I was more than just an employee. I was the one who held the answers, and I wasn't going to back down. "I'll make them listen, Jessica, and when I do, they'll know exactly who's in charge." She smiled, a little uncertain but impressed. "I'm with you. Just tell me what you need." "Everything," I said, "and I'll let you know when I need it." The door clicked shut as Jessica left, and I turned back to the desk, the reality of it all settling in. The systems were secure for now, but there was still so much work to do. There were meetings with the board, follow-ups with the general, and more systems to rebuild. But I knew one thing for sure: this time I was the one calling the shots. And nothing was going to stop me,